Welcome back to Haulin Bass TV. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Before we get started today, I want to make sure that you guys please go down and hit that subscribe button and make sure you hit the little notification bell next to the subscribe button so that you know when I post the next video. This video is about my top 6 fall baits for what I personally use. So let's roll that killer intro and get right into this video. Alright y'all, so before we really get into my top 6 baits, I want to talk a little bit about what the fish are doing right now. The fish are actually moving up part of them so they can feed, so they get real fat before the winter, so they can really be kind of lazy and just chill out because they don't want to do a whole lot during the winter. They can't move real quick in the winter because they're very lethargic. So right before winter, they feed up real hard so that they can survive through the full winter. Now there's 2 different types of fish depending on what lake or pond or river system you're trying to fish, but in lakes, half of the fish, most of the time, half of the fish move shallow and half of them stay out deep. Most of them aren't really off the ledges. Most of them are off brush piles or large rock piles near points, the ones that are out deep. And the other ones will push all the way to the back of creeks when they're pushing shad. Now that we've discussed where the fish will generally be, let's discuss the baits. The first bait that I'm gonna pick out is a bone walking bait. This is actually Spook by Heddon, and it is probably my favorite way because you can launch this thing a mile across points, over the top of brush piles, especially in a little bit clear water reservoirs or clear water lakes. You can walk this over the top of a brush pile that's 10 foot down and spots will come up and absolutely crush this thing. Especially when the shad are busting on the points, this is something that I throw at them because it has that loud knocker to get their attention over the other thousands of shad out there busting. This is one of my favorite things to throw. Sticking with the deep theme, the next thing I really like to throw is a deep crankbait. I like to throw these around off the points, around brush piles, on the edges of them. Also, I like to throw them near rock piles. They still will bite the crap out of a deep crankbait in the fall. This one is a DT16 in Big Shad, and this is an XD6 in Sexy Shad. Those are my 2 favorite things. A lot of times I will start with the 6XD because sometimes they will call fish a little bit further, but sometimes in the fall, since they have been beat down with a deep crank so much during the summer, they won't bite the loud 6XD. And if they won't bite the 6XD, I throw the Rapala DT16 or DT20, depending on how deep that brush pile or rock pile is. This actually, the DT16 is something that I really love throwing from June or May all the way until the spring. This is one of the things that I really love throwing. Still on the deep, my next thing that I love throwing is a big football jig. It is something that you can crawl through brush piles, you can crawl through rocks, and it just plain gets bit. There's nothing, honestly, a jig is a big fish bait, and it is good all year round. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. You will get bit on a jig, period. That is something I really, really like throwing into brush piles, on rocky points, throw it up on the point and drag it off, or even throw it across a point and drag it over the point. It is something that I really enjoy doing, and that is something that has caught me a lot of big fish over the years. This is actually a 3/4 ounce football jig. I use that when we're getting down there pretty deep in the 20 to 25 foot range. Sometimes in the 15-foot range if I'm trying to move very quickly, but a 1/2 ounce football jig will do you great. There's only 3 colors that I throw, and I don't even have one of them out here. It is green pumpkin, and this one has a little bit of brown in it. It's not a huge deal to me. This one is brown with a little orange in it. Just a green pumpkin and a brown, and the last one I throw is black and blue. That's all I throw. I don't need all these crazy colors. I'll throw a white swim jig every so often, but not very often. I got green pumpkin, I got brown, and when it's really, really dirty, I got black and blue. That's it. Jig fishing, super simple. All right, so still sticking with the deep, but yet you can use this in the shallows, is a jerkbait. The #1 fall bait that catches them. This may be my favorite bait to throw because it's fun to watch them fish come up and explode this thing. But this jerkbait just plain catches them. This is actually a Strike King jerkbait. I think it's the KVD 300. I'm not exactly sure. It is a deep jerkbait. It is 11-foot jerkbait. And what I actually really like doing with these jerkbaits is finding deeper brush piles that go up to about 15 to 10 feet. And I can adjust how deep this jerkbait's gonna go with line size. And I really like to stick them right above those brush piles and just sit it there. And those fish will come unglued for it. This is another deeper jerkbait. This one goes about 8 foot. This Strike King goes 11 feet. This one is the Rapala Shadow Wrap. It is a slow sinking jerkbait. This is the white with the holographic on the side. I believe they call it Ghost. I'm not sure though. One of my favorite things about these 2 jerkbaits is the 3 treble hooks, because a lot of times fish will slash at jerkbaits because it's more of a reaction strike. They'll actually slash at them. So if you have more or the 3 treble hooks, more than likely good to hook them. And with throwing a jerkbait, you can also go very shallow. This is actually the Ripstop 9 by Rapala, and I think it's 1 to 3 foot jerkbait. But this is really good when you're in the backs of those creeks chasing those bass, and those bass are chasing those shad. You can throw a jerkbait out there. If you've already thrown your topwaters and they're not hitting those, you can throw a jerkbait out there into the shad, jerk it through there, and just let it sit. And those bass are still chasing them, and when they finally disperse, you're going to be sitting there and you will get crushed. That's one good way to catch bass in the fall when they're in the backs of those creeks, is a jerkbait, a shallow jerkbait. The next one we have is a lipless crankbait. One of my absolute favorite ways to fish shallow, because I'm a very fast fisherman and I really don't like slowing down. It's something that honestly Julio drives him insane, but a lipless is a great way to burn a bait and find some fish. There's 2 ways that I fish this. We can do the offshore version first, and I don't have an LV500 right now, but that's one of my favorite for the offshore. It's a yo-yo technique. You throw it out on them rock piles and you just yo-yo it. You pull it up, and as soon as you feel it flutter, you let it fall again. You pull it up, as soon as you feel it flutter, you let it fall again. Those fish will absolutely demolish that lipless out deep doing that. If you're not out deep and your fish are in the back of creeks, a lipless is another good way because the grass is starting to die off or it's closer to dead, but it's still there. This is something that you can absolutely burn through that grass and rip it out, and it's really easy. You don't even have to have a heavy rod. You can actually go with a medium, maybe a medium heavy if it's not quite dead yet, but it's pretty deteriorated, so you can bust through it really quickly, and you can absolutely rip that thing through the grass and the fish will demolish it. As soon as you rip it through and you reel up your slack, you start to reel again, they will freight train that bait. And if you don't have grass or you're throwing it through shad, you just crank, 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 stop. And it is a split second. Crank, 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 stop. Crank, 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 stop. Crank, crank, crank. And you do it at different patterns, but you will get demolished coming through that. It stops and you look like a dying shad. The next thing that I'm going to mention here, we're starting to move towards the shallow backs of creeks, is a square bill. This is something that you can crawl through trees, you can throw on the bank and bounce it off rocks and shallow rock. You can crawl it through shallow brush piles. This is a very versatile bait that you can throw almost anywhere. And this is the 1.5 by Strike King. One of my favorite colors for the fall because it has a holographic sides, and that really gets the fish's attention when you're trying to stand out. The chartreuse does enough, but the holographic side certainly helps stand out just a touch more. This is something I absolutely love, crawling through the tops of brush piles when they're super shallow and only 6-7 foot of water, but they're even 6 feet tall. And so you can just absolutely crawl that thing through a brush pile. Then the fish that are sitting in it will absolutely come out and freight train that thing. The last thing, and possibly one of the biggest fish catchers that I have in my box, is a DT6. And this is the big shad color, and to be honest, I'm not completely sure what color this is, but it is something that gets used all the time. This is something I will fish when they're up shallow or they're pushing bait up on riprap, like around bridges, or some of you guys on the TVA lakes or just river system lakes, you have riprap that goes all the way down there that can stretch for miles. This is something really good to throw down there and bang off those rocks, and those fish will come out of there and absolutely demolish this DT6. One of my favorite things about this specific, the big shad, is the dark top color and the little bit of purple on the side. Because when you're digging through rocks down there, those fish are seeing the top of it. And when they're seeing the top of it, it's dark with a little bit of purple. And it kind of looks either like a bluegill feeding down there or a crawfish trying to get away. And this bait hasn't been out very long. It's one of the new colors by Rapala, and I have fallen in love with it. This past week, I have caught so many fish throwing this in riprap and rocky banks. It is insane. I'll actually be going much further in depth with each of these baits, like the Spook, the Lipless, the Jigs, and exactly how I throw them, where I throw them, what colors I use, and how I specifically catch fish with each of these baits. So to wrap this up, I hope you guys get out there this fall, pick up some of these baits that I've showed you, what I personally like fishing. I hope this helps you guys out. If you like the content, make sure you hit the like button down below. Once again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you want a sneak peek into everything that's going on with Haulin Bass TV, make sure you head on over to Instagram at Haulin Bass TV. Give us a follow over there. Until next time, go catch your PB for me.
Spartans! What is your profession?